pretty impressive. You people get up pretty early in the morning. Must be fishermen or other hobbies that you do. But I've been with Cargill 42 years. I started in Duluth, Minnesota, right after I got out of vocational school. We lived in Nebraska. We lived in Peoria, Illinois, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and I've been in Tacoma here for 15 years, since 1999. So, that's me. Been with the same company, pounded my way up the ladder like I'm sure some of you did, and so I'm looking forward to retirement in a year or so. So, anyway, what do we do? We're a joint venture, Cargill, CHS. If you eat 3 meals a day, Cargill touches 2 of them. Okay, some way, some form, somehow. Whether it's eggs, chickens, beef, corn, soybean meal, whatever you look on the box at the edge of anything that you eat, Cargill doesn't have their name on it like the Pillsbury Doughboy, but they're there. And so is CHS, which is a farmer's co-op, and those are our 2 partners. And they form TEMCO, the Tacoma Export Marketing Company. All we do is export grain. So, and as you can see, that TEMCO or Tacoma's had a long history of exporting grain. So, we'll touch on that. Like Marv said, we lease our land from the port and the plant, and we pay rent just like everybody else does. And in fact, we just renegotiated our contract a couple of years ago, and to 2050. So we don't plan on going anywhere. Even after I leave, the place will still run like everybody else's. So anyway, that's a little history of that. What do we handle? Believe it or not, we don't handle 1 bushel or 1 pound of wheat. All we handle is corn and soybeans. So all the wheat goes down the Columbia River or in the Oregon and Kalama, Washington, Vancouver area. All we do is we receive unit trains from Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. It takes about 4 days to get a train from Minnesota to Tacoma. So, and basically all we do is unload the rail cars, put them on the ship. We don't store anything. We don't make anything. We don't process anything. We're just a bulk handling facility. How fast can you go? Every hour, every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. In fact, our busy season will be here in about one or 2 weeks. They're starting to harvest. So you'll see ships in the bay, big Panamax vessels. That's where we load. So a little bit. The Panamax ship, why do they call it a Panamax? Because it's the biggest ship that can fit through the Panama Canal today. Normally we put 66,000 metric tons on a Panamax ship. What is 66,000 metric tons? That's 2.5 million bushels of grain. What's a bushel? Well, you got a bushel basket. It's 2.5 million of them. It takes us 3 days to do that. Every 3 days we load another Panamax. It's all about the food chain. It's all about the supply chain. How fast can you unload the cars? How fast can you load the ships? Keep the loop going. It's kind of a little layout of the facility. We're not the fastest on the West Coast, but we're quick. We're real quick because it's a small facility. It's compact. So we unload 2 rail cars at a time, which is about 1,600 to 1,800 metric ton. So our ideal thing is to take it right to the ship. It's graded by the Washington State Department of Agriculture. They're the disinterested third party. So they grade it and verify the weights and everything. We weigh every pound in, we weigh every pound out, just like you would a cash register. Same thing. So the ideal thing is to take the grain right from the rail cars to the ship. That's the BNSF. They're the big boys in town. Probably 80 to 85% of our business travels on the BNSF. So, and I'll get into that more. The other railroad that services us is the CP or the UP. And what the CP does, the Canadian Pacific, They pick up grain in North Dakota and parts of Minnesota. They bring it across the bottom of Canada, and they drop it off to the Union Pacific at Kingsgate, Idaho. The UP takes it from there and brings it to us. These are the areas that we draw our corn or soybeans from. The big triangles are our big shippers. They're the big country elevators. The smaller ones are just kind of, so we get 53% of our soybeans from Minnesota, 29% from North Dakota, 15% from South Dakota, and a little bit out of Nebraska. So that's where our products come from. Each train is 110 cars, 11,000 metric tons, 66,000 metric ton ship, 6 trains, fill a ship. Simple math. It's all about logistics. Corn. 76% of our corn comes out of Minnesota, western, southwestern Minnesota. Big corn belt, big corn belt. North Dakota grows a little bit, South Dakota, a little bit out of Nebraska. That's a picture of a country elevator somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but it's somewhere in the country. Who's our corn trading partners? Well, Japan, big trading partner. Korea, Taiwan. Now this is 12. Not much has changed except one thing. I didn't get. China no longer buys corn from America. They're having a lot of economic issues over there. This price supports. China's going through a lot of changes right now. So, but you can see who buys all our soybeans. It's all about China. So we say we don't export anything to China, don't believe them. It's not true. If you take a ship, okay, right now soybeans are trading for probably $10 a bushel off the West Coast. So what, you got 2.5 million bushels, so what's your cargo worth? We load one of those every 3 days. $30 million worth of beans on every ship. So it's not for the faint of heart. There's an inspection process that we were having trouble with China. When I was at 2012, 2011, they started buying a lot of our grain, but they thought we were poisoning them. Or they didn't trust us. So they want what they ate, we were going to try to turn them white. Okay? Caucasian. Okay, whatever. They had this theory, okay? So they came in droves to the elevators on the West Coast where they're buying their grain. So we talked to them, and so anyway, we got that all worked out. But, you know, there's a process now with every paperwork that goes to China to make sure that everything's okay. We had to find, everybody talks about traceability. This is just an example of a vessel recap, but traceability, food safety today is a big deal, even if you're not making anything, okay? So where'd the grain come from that you put on my ship? Well, it came out of Maynard, Minnesota. It came out of Canton, South Dakota. It came out of Woolsey, Minnesota. It came out of Emory, South Dakota. So we keep track of, even though we don't know exactly every pound of grain, but we do know where the origination is of that grain that goes on that ship. And like I said, this feed safety thing has really increased the past couple of years. People are tired of not knowing what they're eating, and I don't blame them, or where it came from. And here we had another problem with the Chinese. They thought we were trying to poison them by feeding them treated seeds in their soybeans. So if anybody knows what a treated seed is, that's the seed that you put in the ground to make the plant grow. Okay, so it does have carcinogens of some type. Okay, if you buy a pack of peas and you put them in the ground, that's a treated seed because it's treated to grow. Okay, so we were having trouble with them, and they thought we were doing treated seeds to them. So again, they came in droves, and again, we proved that we weren't. So anyway, so what's our little facts about our elevator? We can hold 3 million bushels. So you can see if the ship takes 2.5 million bushels and we can only store 3 million, we got to keep going. We got to keep going. We can load about 2,000 tons an hour, unload and load about 2,500 metric tons or 100,000 bushels. That's pretty much it. The people that work at the plant, there's 12 of us as management, and we employ roughly 50 longshoremen, both day and night, plus there's probably 15 or 20 Department of Agricultural people that we help employ, plus Foss Tug, plus the National Cargo Bureau, plus agents, vessel agents, stores. So it's a lot of money that moves through that little facility, believe it or not, that people live on. So I'll take any questions, if you have any. If not, yes?
You mentioned Panamax, but could you accept a larger ship if they were available?
Not because we can, but the cost goes up because the beam of the ship gets wider and our spouts will only reach out so far, so we would have to turn the ship a couple times to load it properly, to stow it, which is, sometimes that takes the margin out of loading, that you're going to make from the grain cargo that you loaded. So because they don't come in and shift the ship, you got to get a pilot, you got to get 2 tugs, you got to get lines people. It's a big expense to turn the ship around. So Panamax is about as big a ship as we can load without logistic issues. Yes?
The ships, who owns the ships?
The ships are usually chartered, like Costco, the Chinese Ocean Shipping Company. They might charter. It takes 15 days to get from here to China or Japan or Korea. So they usually charter a ship for a year, and they try to get as many turns as they can on a ship. So there are some private companies that own ships, but I think a lot of them are pretty much chartered for a year at a time, like you'd lease a car or you'd lease a trailer or whatever.
What are their primary uses of the products?
They crush the beans. There's a lot of protein in the soybean. Normal soybean is 35 to 38% protein, plus there's usually 18 to 22% oil. So the entire little soybean is a tremendous food value. And if you have a 1,400,000,000 people and they eat 1 more ounce of protein every day, do the math.
Yeah, you mentioned treated seeds. Does that include genetically modified seeds as an issue?
Yes, very much so. They call the soybean seed Roundup Ready. That's the GMO's slang for soybeans. Roundup Ready means you don't have to use as many pesticides, you don't have to use as much fertilizer, nitrogen, but then again, it's in the seed to fight those diseases and to make it grow with less water, stuff like that. So yeah, GMO is a big deal. A lot of companies, even the Cargills and the ADMs of the world, they're getting away from, the people are speaking up and they're listening, and hopefully it'll change. Europe has a big they don't like GMO at all, Europe. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but they're non-GMO orientated.
How did the longshoreman strike affect your business?
Really, we have a separate contract. We have what we call the grain handlers agreement, which is separate from the container boys. So it really didn't. We have our own issues sometimes, but I think overall we have a contract now until 2018 with the longshore, and it's been, I will say one thing, they're the ones that are steadies, that want to come there every day, that we hire every day, great group of people, hard workers. They give a lot of slang to the longshoremen sometime, but they move a lot of product and they move a lot of cargo, and they do have their problems like everybody else. Yes.
Your business is so efficient and on such a thin margin. How do you include those small grain terminals, those your smaller co-op members? It just seems like that's not very efficient.
Well, the smaller ones usually find a niche business that aren't very fast or very productive. Today, today, for example, to unload a 110-car train takes us 8 hours. In the country, the railroad pays you an incentive for loading the train fast and to unload it fast.
Yeah, right.
Okay? So you have 15 hours from the time the train hits your track to unload it. And the railroad will pay you $100 a car. So they'll pay you $11,000 for unloading that train in less than 15 hours. Because the railroad wants it back on the track.
Yeah.
Okay? All the railroad wants to do today is drop it off
Yeah.
and pick it up.
Right.
They don't want to switch, they don't want to do nothing. They just want to run up and down the railroad tracks. That's what they do. And they have all these little toys they make. Did you ever notice that when they're working on rail? Did you ever see equipment like those guys make? It's amazing. You know, it's all built for the railroad. I mean, it's just, I think it's cool, but that's just me. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's just, it's all about efficiencies, even in the country. You know, I mean, Cargill's and the CHSs and everybody, they've spent hundreds of millions of capital dollars, you know, getting the efficiencies in the country so that we can keep the supply chain going. I mean, the facility that I'm at, we've probably spent since, I want to say 2005, 10-year span, we've probably invested, I want to say $30 to $35 million. Now that's with outside contractors, that's buying steel, that's building a roof that we built, everything. Upgrading our rail infrastructure in the plant area itself. We have a backup for everything there. We need 2 locomotives to run that place, we have 3. You need 2 motors to run that place, we have 3. In case the one goes down, the next one's ready. That's all it is. It's about go, 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 and safe, 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 safe. We have a state-of-the-art hazard communication program, monitoring. We monitor every point. We monitor every conveyor belt. We monitor every overshot. Any place that grain moves, we're monitoring it all the time.
Can you talk a little bit about why you put a roof on at your facility?
We put a roof on because we did a study. It rains 25 to 35 days a year in the state, at SeaTac. That's where we measured it, was at SeaTac. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean it rains 25 or 35 days. That means it rains 25 to 35 days straight, in theory. So it can rain for 8 hours straight here. Now, you're not getting much precipitation, but you're getting the rain down, okay? So that roof, believe it or not, is an acre. It covers, a Panamax ship is 7 hatches. That roof covers 3.5 hatches of a 7-hatch. So a ship is 750 feet long. The roof is 300 feet long, wide. Okay? So it covers, and what we do, we haul the ship up and down the dock, slide it under the roof. A lot of it depends on a captain. Captain gets nervous if the rain starts coming sideways, he doesn't want to load, but we paid for that. If the faster you load a ship, the more money you make, because it's called dispatch and demurrage. If you don't load the ship fast, the ship charges you, or the ship owner or the charter party charges you because you took too long to load the ship. So you have so many days to load it. If you load it faster, you make more money. More money, more turns. So the roof was $7 million to build. It paid for itself in 1 year. 1 year payback.
Terry, how many trains at a time do you have stacked up along there?
We can have 2 to 3.
2 to 3, okay.
Yeah. Most of the time we unload right around 2 trains a day. So about 1 million bushels a day, or 22,000 tons a day every day.
Yeah.
Who's in charge of moving the ship when it's tied up to the dock in terms of positioning the vehicle?
The crew does.
The crew does.
Yeah.
So it's not
once
the pilot.
Once the lines people set the ship up on the dock,
Okay.
then they just shift it, just like you would,
Okay.
you know, a bigger ship at a whatever. But yeah, just yes.
Would you give us an idea of just the total time to end up from when this thing, when the corn is harvested to it in the Chinese
Oh,
Wherever it happens to be.
follow the soybean, you mean?
Yeah. What's it take from Minnesota to here?
Well, it takes 5 days from Minnesota to here.
How long is it in the grain elevator?
Never.
Never. In Minnesota or wherever?
It could be there a couple months,
Okay.
you know. Normally, the soybeans are really, you don't, because of the price of them, you don't store them for a long period of time. So it's supply and demand. So we pretty much, what we don't export, America consumes locally, or regionally, or nationally. So I would say if you took 15, 30, probably take from the time 2 months from the country to China to get crushed and probably put in their food system or feed system. A couple months.
You mentioned that there's a busy season, and with limited space to store your facility, where do the queues tend to end up with the product?
Where did the what?
Are there queues that stack up? Because if you guys have a limited ability to load so much, and yet it's a busy season, so you got more corn and soybean coming, where do those queues kind of tend? There's limited rail lines, there's limited storage, limited loading. Is it farther in country with?
Farther in country.
Kind of, they get stacked up?
What'll happen is when export starts declining, then the market starts to drop, just like the stock market. Okay, when grain goes down $1 a bushel, then the farmer says, well, I'm not selling. It cost me $4 to grow it, and they want to pay me $3. I can't do that. So they sit on it. That's what they did this summer. They sat on. We got a big crop this year, huge crop, and especially the area we draw from. The growing season was excellent. And when I was back there in August for a wedding, a good Italian wedding on my wife's side, 3-dayer. We had golf in, though. We got golf in. Anyway. No, yeah, so it'll stay on the farm or stay in the country elevator. That's where it stays. Okay.
One of our members, Michael Kretmeyers, is with Food Protection Services, and I think, don't they do some work?
They do, yes, well, not only they do our pest control, and they also do our fumigation of our vessels.
Okay.
Every vessel that leaves that China buys, they demand it be fumigated with phosphate, which is a common bug killer, I guess you would call it. And so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a busy guy.
Yeah, because he does a lot of the terminals.
He does Seattle, he does Tacoma, he does Kalama. He has a big contract with TEMCO.
Yeah.
So they're good. They're fast. See, again, they're fast, they're good, they do it right.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry.
Yeah.
That's great.
What is for soybeans the growing cycle and the harvest cycle?
Planted in late April, early May, harvested today.
And how long is that? A month, 2 months?
Oh, I would say no more than a month nowadays. They got combines and pickers and tractors they're out there. I mean, they got GPS on these tractors.
Yeah.
I mean, and not only that, but once they set them, there's no variation. They just stay on course. If you've ever been inside a real farm, you don't farm with less than 2,000 acres anymore. That's it. You're either big or you stay at home. You find a niche somewhere, a non-GMO partner like PCC, something like that.
You mentioned corn and soybean here. Where does the wheat go out of?
The wheat goes out of mainly the Columbia River. The Snake River to the Columbia, down to the Willamette. It's the Palouse, they call it. And we can't handle barges because we don't have a river system. And they don't build seagoing barges for grain. So if you don't have barges, you can't compete in the wheat market because wheat is so different because there's proteins, there's falling numbers. Falling numbers meaning what's the glucose in the wheat to make bread, or is it going to make donuts? Are you going to bake cakes with it? I mean, there's so many different. variations with wheat that it's a much more complicated commodity, I guess would be the word.
So far I've counted that you're a farmer, a nutritionist, an economist, a mechanic, and a freight distribution expert.
That's right.
Well, I don't know about that one. But like I said, when, you know, they call them A, B, C, and D. Archer Daniels Midland, Bunge, Cargill, and Louis Dreyfus control the world for food.
Wow.
And that's the name of the game. That's it. And everybody, each one of them got 25%. That's all. And they do other things within between. You know, if you eat chicken McNuggets at McDonald's, Cargill makes them.
That's true.
If you get a dipping sauce at Burger King, Cargill makes them. Our dressing, sauces, and oils department, our business unit makes them. So that's the way it is.
Wow.